today we talk about a glimpse into getting your science featured on a journal cover. We are SayoStudio. I'm Nicolle, and we have Claire here today. We are talking about a really exciting project. So, Claire, if you want to describe that.
Yeah, so we are going into a specific project we just finished up and has just been um, published on the Nature Journal cover. So that's really exciting. And we thought this illustration in particular was just a really good example of visual metaphor for kind of a big, overarching technical topic. So yeah, we're excited to delve in and give you all the details. Okay, well, hello everybody. Um, I'm Claire, the art director here at SayoStudio, and this is Nicolle, the founder and creative director. Today we are doing our first remote podcast video. So bear with us.
Yeah, it's kind of
And
fun. I
yeah,
was
it
just
is
going to
fun.
share that we're in our home studios as opposed to a fancy set. So,
Yes, it is fun. And the topic is fun today as well. We are going to be kind of talking through a project. So it's sort of a case study, if you will, of a cover art piece that I created for nature. And we thought this could be helpful because it's just a good example of visual metaphor for a pretty big, overarching technical topic.
yes.
So yeah.
And that's something that we spoke about a little bit more broadly in our last podcast, if you all want to go check that out. So today we're excited to look at that in more detail and also just, I think, help show people some of the really incredible science that's being done right now.
I guess just a little bit of background about this project and what made it a little bit different in regards to kind of our typical cover art project. So a big difference is that this client was essentially guaranteed the Nature Journal cover. And so they were working with the nature editors and with us to, get this cover illustration to where it needed to be before.
So I'm going to interrupt. I'm
Mhm.
sorry to be rude. So yeah, I think that's great information. And two things that I wanted to jump in and say there is that guaranteed makes it sound like it's easy. I mean, you still needed to work with the client, the Human Cell Atlas, to really develop ideas and pitch them. So
Mhm.
and then the other thing I thought we could take a break and kind of go backward on is what the process normally is like when scientists and researchers are trying to get their work featured on a cover. So I don't know if you want to speak to that, if you want me to talk
Yeah, no,
about that a little bit.
go for it. I
Yeah,
think.
so I guess, I mean, in any journal, whether or not, it's the big ones like Science or Nature or, some of the more subject matter specific ones, oftentimes, there's many papers on many different subjects in each issue. And so once a researcher has their work accepted, they're invited to submit some sort of image for the cover. So there's some scientists, researchers out there that have great photography, whether or not they're doing field studies in East Africa or have awesome simulations of tornadoes that look beautiful and tell their science story. But most scientists out there can't easily show off their work in a way that's visually appealing to a broader audience. So that's where they come to us. And so we love working with all of those people, but the thing that's difficult and challenging that we've talked before about on our blog, which we can point you to in the description here, is that there's, say 5 other groups that have submitted papers that are equally as interesting and, relevant to like the larger scientific community. And so you're all kind of competing. So you're all submitting images. And so when we help scientists submit images, it can be a little bit, I think, daunting and frustrating, especially if you're new to that and you don't understand that there's all of these outside reasons why your image might be chosen. Like sometimes, we don't know what the editors have in store to publish like right this instant. So perhaps like the subject matter is the same, maybe it's very different, but the image we ended up creating is similar looking to what they have going out. There's all sorts of decision making that we're not privy to that the journals are considering. So that's my big spiel about how the journal art usually goes. And so in this instance, this topic, the entire issue, is that correct, was about this topic. And so that's why there was a much higher likelihood that they would, use the art and also want to work with us and give us feedback if it's not what they were interested in.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was the entire issue, but there was a collection of papers from this client's organization that were part of this issue. So maybe not the entire issue, but a big portion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in regards to what you were saying, or just on that note, me and you, Nicolle, have had so many conversations about what we wished we could be privy to, or how we in an ideal world we could work in some form with these nature editors a little bit more closely to kind of just get the background and what's happening with this issue. And
interestingly enough, the other time that we got to work a little bit more directly with editors was with Science Magazine when it was a similar topic. It was actually collaborators with the group that we're talking about today. So,
yeah. Before going into kind of the concept development and about, who this client is, as well as that past project and how that was kind of related. Just kind of a quick, as far as the illustration creation process goes, previously I said, guaranteed the cover, which you pointed out, maybe that's not totally fair to say. There's still, work that we have to put in to get it to where it needs to be. So guaranteed, you're right, is not a good word. That being said, I think our process doesn't change so much as far as like our creative process. It doesn't change so much in this type of situation. We start with our research of the topic internally, our concept development, then we deliver a sketch. And really the difference is with these deliverables, nature being pulled into that feedback and then revision process. So as far as the creation process goes, it doesn't change much. There's just kind of an extra step of feedback and revision from the nature editors themselves. And then, we're able to incorporate that and move forward as we would otherwise.
Yeah. So to start with, the title of this, of our project is Human Cell Atlas. So what is it? What is Human Cell Atlas?
So Human Cell Atlas is an international consortium, collaboration
Mm-hmm.
um, that's made up of thousands of people and um, from over 100 countries, which is really, really cool. And their goal is to create this globally relevant, comprehensive atlas, is what they're calling it. So, human cell atlas.
Mm-hmm.
And that atlas is made up of several different atlases, 18 at the moment. I imagine that could change. But each atlas is, a different system of the human body. And um, each of those systems is looking at the individual cells of that system and um, understanding them. First of all, getting all of the cells that are part of that system, which, we
Mm-hmm.
still don't have all of that information. And then, you know, how they interact, spatially, etc.
And
So it's a
so,
huge project, as you might imagine.
yeah, can I ask you a question there about that?
Yeah.
So, say we have an immune cell, like a white blood cell. If you know the way it
Mhm.
acts, is there more to it? Like, does it really matter, like how it acts in, say, the spleen versus the heart versus is that what they're trying to piece out, like how different cells like of one type might act in different ways and interact with things? Is that part of the excitement here?
Definitely.
Okay. Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. So, and I think in my mind, that's kind of like the spatial aspect to it. Cells,
Okay.
the same cell of the immune system can act differently in a different system or
hmm
in a
hmm
different, you know, environment.
what I was going to ask is something like an epithelial cell, which, is part of our skin and part of the lining of all of like our guts and our blood vessels and all that. I mean, in some ways, I think that seems like a very simple cell. Like, okay, I see the way it makes up my skin, but then if you imagine all the different tissues it's in, it probably does vary really drastically from one system to another. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around like what
Hmm.
this means to really like look at the cell level across all these systems. So, and I guess what we spoke
That's
about
a
the
great
other,
example.
yeah,
No, it
what we
is.
spoke,
Just thinking about, oh, sorry, I'm interjecting, but just
yeah,
that's a
no,
good example because just thinking about, the skin around our heart, just
hmm
being in a liquid environment.
yeah, yeah,
Anyways, it's a,
yeah.
yeah.
So I guess I was going to lead us into what we spoke about yesterday, which we don't have to go into detail, but it's kind of exciting about this potentially being, you know, the future of a lot of different scientific areas, but specifically for human health and human biology is understanding more detail at like a very specific small level, but then like broadly how that relates across a lot of different systems and organs. And it sounds like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, part of what they're doing is also taking samples from a lot of from different people across the world, so that we're not just collecting from one person and saying this is a representative sample. So that's exciting too.
Really exciting. Really exciting. And
Yeah.
to your point about this being the future, yeah, just this type of organization in itself, because of our, globalization, like what we're capable of as far as communication globally, and
hmm
what it means to unify research in a global way.
hmm
It's easy to imagine how limiting that is, or how that's always been limiting in the past. So yeah, that this collaborative form of research being the future is really exciting.
Yeah. And I know,
Yeah.
I think you said already, but I'm trying to remember how many different scientists or groups did they say were involved? I don't know. Oh, I'm looking at their website now, at the Human Cell Atlas's website now. So 823 labs. And you imagine like how many different people there
Yeah.
are in each of those labs. And it's
I think it
pretty
was
incredible.
over 3,000.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking
Yeah.
when you were talking. So I think it's over 3,000 people. So yeah, over 3,000
Mm-hmm.
people, a part of 800 or so different labs in over 101 different countries.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about how incredible it is, do we want to start diving into kind of the ideas that you were playing with, that the client started out with, and how that helped represent the science?
Thinking back to kind of our initial conversation with the client, um, I think we went through over two different kind of concepts that were not fully developed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was some kind of visual in mind, but um, there was, lots of room for fleshing those ideas out more
Mm-hmm.
fully. So the first one was what we ended up running with in the end in some form, but
Mm-hmm.
not its original form. And so that was the idea of a subway map.
Uh-huh.
And, the subway map, how a subway map depicts different lines. And then some subway maps, show the lines that are in development still. So what is to be
Mm-hmm.
built,
Mm-hmm.
which was relevant in this case because, as we mentioned, this atlas is in the process of being created. I think right now
Okay.
they have 2 of the 18 atlases
Uh-huh.
publicly available. So there's lots of work to be done.
Okay.
um,
How
so
do
yeah, that was
those
the first idea.
atlases? Oh, sorry. How do those atlases line up with the idea of the subway lines?
Yeah. So at this point, it was actually different. At this point, in like the idea that was, you know, presented by the client, it was
Mm-hmm.
the stations would represent the
Oh,
18
okay.
different systems. So
Okay.
the
Okay.
lines
Uh-huh.
connect the stations, which are the 18 different systems, and these
Oh, cool.
stations are still in like being built, like still
Mm-hmm.
like under construction.
Okay. Okay. I'm getting it.
Yeah. So that's where we
Um,
started with this
okay.
first idea.
Okay. And can I jump in and
Mhm.
interject one more thing? So,
Yes.
one of the challenges and fun parts about this, in addition to kind of like showing the just the how big of a research result this is, all like there is that in the end, not only is it reporting the results, they also want to show that this is like a usable resource in the future as well, right? So I mean,
Mhm.
that's one reason I think they were trying to think of like maps and atlases, because this could be something that other people can use as a way to get to their objectives in their research and help connect things. So okay, continue.
Yeah. 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 And then an important piece, at this stage for the client was that machine learning was represented in some form visually, just
Oh, okay.
because of the technology that is being incorporated into this project that makes it, you know, as um, comprehensive as it is at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of a subtext to this idea. We want it to be, you know, I think they use the words like um, high tech looking or
Mhm.
something like that. And then the second idea was um, the atlas being represented by, some visual of the human body
Mhm.
that you then can zoom into to find all the different systems that make up this human body.
Okay.
And I remember at this point, Nicole, you mentioned kind of this like hologram human body that, is made up of whatever makes sense to represent what makes up this organization. And then, you can kind of zoom into different systems.
Oh, now I'm remembering that idea.
Mhm. And the client said that's too, like, we're too early for that type of visual. Like, it's
Okay.
like that is a great visual for what HCA is, but it's
Mhm.
too soon because we don't have that full human holographic picture yet. So that was really
Okay.
interesting to
So
hear
that
from the
was
client.
too, I don't want to use the word real, but yeah, they wanted something more abstract and symbolic. And,
Yeah.
okay. That's
Yeah.
also a helpful thing to think about. I mean, as far as like why we use metaphors and when we do. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And now that I explained the second idea, I realized that the final idea is actually a combination of the two in some form, of the two ideas, which I was thinking it was more aligned with the first idea. But now that I've talked through it again, I realize that it is kind of a combination, which is kind of fun. So yeah, that was the kind of that was the initial conversation with the client. And then from there, it was me going to the drawing board and getting sketches out. And I did a variety initially. I think I kind of sketched out a similar idea in two different forms. And then it evolved into like 4 separate concepts that were all kind of related, that
Wow, that's a
ultimately we
lot.
presented. Yeah. And ultimately we presented all of those in a package with
Mhm.
the, metaphors explained and with notes included. We presented that
Uh-huh.
all in a package to the nature editors to get their feedback before
Okay.
proceeding to color art.
I have a digital art nerdy question. So when we talk about sketches, when you talk about sketches,
Mm.
are you doing that? Are you mocking it up like in a computer program? Are you doing pencil sketches? How do you do that? What does a sketch mean?
So here as for me, but I
Hmm.
think in general, I could
Yeah.
say for here at SayoStudio, that looks like sketching on an iPad.
Hmm. So it's
And
still hand drawing,
mhm,
but it's on a digital tablet.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep. So digital hand drawing. And we like to, use like the sketch brushes. So like,
Hmm.
like a pencil tool essentially. So it has that pencil texture
Yeah.
um to really present the closest thing to a true hand-drawn sketch,
Hmm.
because what we found is that it just allows for that space and interpretation that you still need in these early
Hmm.
stages of concept development,
Yeah.
where the client can look at it and still imagine how it can be different and not
Hmm.
get too stuck on.
Yeah. Kind of gives them permission
Yeah,
to offer different ideas, and yeah, I agree.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And it gives us that permission too, um
mhm.
where we haven't committed fully, um
Yeah.
And it's at that stage, it's easy to move things around or to remove things or to add something.
Mhm.
So all around, I think
Yeah.
it's really important.
I think that sometimes we go back on that policy of ours to do a pencil sketch. And we're like, well, maybe this time we'll just do a color draft. And it feels like it never, I shouldn't say never, but it very seldom works out well, because when we give an initial draft, there's always confusion over like, wait, is this the final? And like, no, like we're still working on this, and the look is going to be different. And I don't know. It feels like, yeah, it's always a much better collaboration when we're able to do pencil sketches. But I'm sorry that I got us on this tangent, so we can keep going.
No, it's important.
Yeah.
It's important. So yeah, so initial meeting, going into, creating this
Mm-hmm.
deliverable, and then I ended off with what we presented as a full
Mm-hmm.
package to the nature editors.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
And so,
oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to ask. So in this instance, even though we got to have their feedback, we weren't actually working directly with them. So you gave this to our contacts at Human Cell Atlas, and then they were the ones that were actually in direct contact with nature. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that sometimes when there's like a middle person like that,
Middleman. That's the word.
yeah, there can be miscommunication and it feels like you're playing telephone. But in this instance, it felt like it went really well. And I think partly that's because, one of the main contacts, Anya, it was really good at kind of understanding, like the vision that we were portraying and what they were trying to get across. So I think that's partly why it worked well, because she was able to communicate some of the things we were still working on and what we wanted to show and what they wanted to show. So
I totally agree. With kind of our clients, when there's not a middleman,
mm-hmm.
we will present ideas with explanation, but there's kind of a natural evolution of like, maybe we meet and then we ask questions and then we're on the same page and then we do a kind of an adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, Anya was so good at requesting to summarize that process we did initially really
Mm-hmm.
thoroughly in this collection of sketches. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was really important, and in general really important when there's any kind of middleman situation, because it can get frustrating pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, that was definitely a reason why it was able to go so smoothly overall.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the packet went to them. I think that's where we left off.
Yeah. Yeah. So the packet went to nature editors and we got feedback. And they essentially narrowed down the choice to, I think, 2 of the 4 sketches.
Okay.
So, and with, some, actually at that point, there wasn't many adjustments moving into color art, if I'm remembering correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just a clear, like, this is our preference as far as these concepts presented, and you have the go-ahead to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we did.
Yeah. And so something that we talked about a little bit ago, I guess it was in our last podcast, was that when we're doing initial research on the topic, it's not only about the topic, but it's kind of about the look and style. So in this instance, I think that you looked at some of the other more editorial covers that Nature had done and gave
Mhm.
those as part of like the idea generation to them. So am I remembering that correctly?
So to Nature, they I provided kind of just a verbal description of the style we were
Okay.
imagining.
Uh-huh.
Um, Not an actual image of kind of some of the past cover art that
Mm-hmm.
um, had kind of the more graphic style we were leading
Yeah.
towards,
Uh-huh.
um, but summed that up
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
And
Because I feel like that went really well, and it was really fun to see the artwork that you came up with, and also how Human Cell Atlas and Nature were really behind, like pretty, I don't know, like really beautiful art that really leaned into the metaphor, and yeah, um, like
yeah,
kept a. I hate using the word modern because it can mean so many things to different people, but a really like fresh look to the art. So
yeah. And we've talked about this before. Well, yesterday we talked about this, just the
hmm
commitment to the metaphor and
yeah,
how in this case, um, that commitment was made, and I think it that shows in the final product
hmm
because there's so much clarity,
hmm
and a lot of times in our process, our initial metaphor can get really muddied because these topics are complex, and
hmm
researchers are like, oh shoot, well, what about this? Well, we have to be a little bit more technical about this.
hmm
And it makes sense, and
yeah,
there's reason. um but yeah, that initial metaphor gets muddied, and it can work
hmm
visually, but there is, yeah, just a beauty in avoiding that because it
hmm
makes it, in my opinion, the most accessible to the biggest audience.
hmm
Yeah. So yeah, that was a very pleasant surprise. It doesn't always go like that. And um,
yeah,
as artists, being able to run with kind of our initial concept and metaphor, I think that's just like a huge treat.
hmm yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's interesting when you look at the artwork. The um, it leaves a lot of room for imagination too, which I think is perfect in this situation when it's also something um, that has so much more to come for this atlas. And so I'm thinking about, like, I hope that people will have fun studying it and saying, oh, like that's the symbol of the brain. I see it. And that's the symbol of the gut. Like it's simple and fun to discover and kind of dive in and look at closely.
So the metaphor that we landed on was the subway map.
hmm
The lines, so the different subway lines
Okay.
are actually what ended up making up the different systems that the 18 different systems that make up the full, or atlases that make up the full human cell atlas.
Okay. When you say systems, what does that mean to somebody who isn't in this research? What's a system?
So in this context, the systems, are the brain or the nervous system, the
Okay.
gastrointestinal system,
Okay.
the respiratory system, the reproductive developmental system.
Okay. That makes sense. I was
Ugh.
thinking organs, but it's bigger than organs. It's like I get it.
It's
Thank
bigger
you.
than organs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, so that evolved from, potentially the different subway stations
Mm-hmm.
representing the systems and the
Okay.
lines just connecting them.
Mm-hmm.
So visually, the way I imagined representing this was turning the subway lines into kind of abstract, the subway lines themselves in an abstract manner
Mm-hmm.
would um, make up a visual of that system. So, thinking of the nervous system or the brain,
Okay.
how can this subway line kind of wrap around to visually represent what we think of when we think of a brain?
Okay, so the entire subway is really the human, and then the different lines are the different um, body systems.
Yes.
Okay, and then I know that it was important to them to kind of show three dimensions. So one, I can't remember why that was, and two, I can't remember how you use those different kind of layers in the subway map.
Yeah, so initially this was kind of part of the iterations for those initial sketches that we shared,
Mm-hmm.
and one was flat, and then the others were 3D in the sense that this subway map was kind of divided into layers that were stacked on top of one another in a
Mm-hmm.
kind of splayed out um, manner.
Okay.
Yeah, and so those different layers originally were, there were more layers than what we ended up with. So, the subway lines themselves, and then overlaid over this city map, which you often see in subway maps that you look at, like a true subway map, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
how does this line up to the different blocks that are actually at surface level?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and then below that is kind of a representation of algorithm, machine learning,
Okay.
and then below that, a representation of the global reach of this program.
Mm-hmm.
So, the map of the globe as a whole. Um, and yeah, just a fun part of the the visually representing the city map
Mm-hmm.
that the subway lines move around,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just a classic, here are streets and blocks and this is where the subway lines are taking you.
Mm-hmm.
um, we we created kind of a H&E stain version of a city map.
Okay. Cool.
So, H&E staining, you've probably seen it before. It's that really pretty, different shades of purple typically. There can be
Mm-hmm.
other colors, but typically it's different shades of purple, and um, it just stains the different cell types in a sample of tissue.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what we drew inspiration from. And the idea was that it made these subway line representations of systems connected then to the cellular level, which is, what the human cell atlas is all about, the
Awesome.
different cells of the human body. So, as I was talking, I realized that there was a change request or revision request
Mm-hmm.
from, I'm actually not sure if it was from Nature or if it was more from Anya.
Okay.
Um, but what was not part of the original sketches was while, it showed a flat version and then kind of everything divvied up into this skewed set of layers, it did not show these subway lines kind of moving throughout all of the layers in kind of a 3D layout. So that was probably the biggest revision to the chosen initial concept, moving into color art.
And I think I remember thinking it sounded kind of weird, but I think it really pulls it together. I really like the way it came out. So
I agree. And it was interesting. It was just fun in this really graphic style, turning these really well thought out lines, essentially, as far as how they curved and how they connected to one another and where they connected, pulling those along the y-axis.
Yeah.
So that was a fun challenge because, it's not true 3D by any means. It's, very graphic look. So it was fun bringing that to life.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of trying to figure out which parts to make more transparent or faded back to make it clear. Oop, I keep hitting that. What's on what level and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And in a way that allows room for, visual inaccuracies. Like it's not, like I said, it's not true 3D. So just getting that message across in a way that's still fun, but clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that is the metaphor that was ultimately presented here with the final cover art.
Well, thank you for talking us through all that. Yeah, and I'm excited for everybody to look at it in detail on the cover of Nature. And yeah, you can check out a little bit more as well on our blog if you're all interested. So,
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
there
thank you.
anything else that we need to touch on that we've forgotten about before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary of this project. A good, hopefully, kind of little case study of how, it went from start to finish.
Yeah.
I guess I just would like to say a big thank you to Anya, who headed this project for HCA with us. She was so incredible to work with, made everything so seamless. And yeah, I think a lot of that, had to do with her excitement and
I think openness to different ways to show things and creativity.
Yeah. And we talk about this a lot, but working with people, one of the best parts of our jobs is working with different, people and researchers and scientists who are so enthusiastic and passionate. And Anya is definitely one of those people. And I think we're just really lucky to be able to have those clients.
Yeah, and kind of be a fly on the wall for this incredible research. And it'll be exciting to see where it comes from here. And one thing that, we haven't talked about today, but like how will this impact individualized medicine in the future? And I think there'll be a lot of good things to come from it. So.
I totally agree. And I think just as a final wrap up note, like this human cell atlas being kind of this amazingly complex reference for what healthy looks like, and then being able for healthcare providers down the line to compare what disease looks like to this atlas of cells is just, if that's achieved, there's no way that can't revolutionize healthcare and medicine. So it's really exciting.
It is.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. We're excited to do this again. We're excited to hammer out podcasting from afar. I know we've had some interesting challenges this time around. that hopefully you guys don't see at all because of our lovely videographer who edits all of that for us. Like
Yeah.
and subscribe. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you'd like to hear. And we look forward to talking to you all again.
Thanks, everybody.